Alright, welcome to the second lesson. In our last lesson, we discussed about conditional statements, where we discuss if statements. So on this one, we're going to discuss about another conditional statement, which is the use of switch and case statement. In our if statement, we use it to determine whether a condition is true or false. So in this case, we're able to do a range by using age, like between 15 and 45, between the ages of 0 to 15. So in this case, if we have to determine a particular value, maybe an actual value, say for instance, you only want to say when age is 10 only, or maybe when the role of a user is admin. In this case, you can make use of switch since it has nothing to do with multiple conditions. So in this case, let me comment this. I'll press Ctrl / to comment. Then I may have to remove some out of the code while I reduce what we also echo down here. Okay, now switch. I still want to use the age which we have set here. So say for instance, if I do switch, then this is where the condition will be, and then the body of the switch. So switch, what are we checking? We're checking for age. Here, age. Age. Then we come into the body of the switch by putting case 10, for instance, colon. Then when the age is 10, echo thank you. Terminate and break. Then look for another condition saying case 20, and this one age is 20, then echo welcome, break, terminate the break as well. In PHP, you have to terminate every statement. Then we can have default. Default is like else in if statement. Echo try again. Break. Okay, so now what default is like else. What are we doing here? We are only checking for age 10 and age 20, nothing out of it. So anything that is out of 10 and 20 will have what? The default. If age is not 10, if it is not 20, then it's going to return the default value, which is what? Try again. Let's see, we have error. So let's see what the error is. It's expecting closing bracket where line 27. Okay, we did not terminate the break, you can see. So that's okay. So though we have an on see, we have try again. So this undefined variable salary, we have removed some things out of this place, so we may need to remove it right here as well, or we comment it so that it won't be giving us error again. We have it try again, because age is not 20, it is not 10. So if we now say okay, age is 10 and reload, now we get it. Thank you. All right, so that is it. Now another thing you cannot do is okay, if you say case 10, I have another case in front, case 15. So any case you want to meet this condition, you put here, and then that they are going to maybe echo this thank you, or they are performing the same thing. So in this case now, since we say case 10, case 20, 15, that means if it is 10 or if it is 20, then it is going to return thank you. So that's how we can combine multiple case statements, or you keep extending this particular one, extend it to accommodate more conditions. I can say okay, when say case 40, then echo well done. Okay, echo well done. So that's it. If we set age to be 40 now, then we get well done. Okay, so that's how you keep extending it, or you combine multiple cases if you have to output the same value. So that is all on conditional statements. So the next thing we are going to look at is iteration. Iteration in PHP. What is our iteration all about? Iteration is what we can refer to as loop. You can call it loop. Under this loop, we have different types of loop. I will just mention few. We have while loop, so we have for loop, we have for each loop. Those are the ones we just discussed in this course. For loop, for each loop, and while loop. All right, so what is loop all about? Loop is to continuously executing or performing a task as long as a condition is true. Taking for instance, if you know the temple run game, the object in the temple run will keep running as long as it hasn't hit any obstacle, probably enter into the dungeon or hit any of the side obstacles. Otherwise it will keep running. That can be used as an example of a loop. Now, how do we go about it? The syntax is while, then the condition, then we have the body of the while loop. Now, before we discuss while loop, we need to talk about something called increment in programming. Increment and decrement. Increment is to increment a value, and decrement is to decrease the value. Taking for instance, if you say 5 plus 1, that gives us 6. In programming, we can as well say 5 plus plus. It is also equal to 6. That is it. Okay, so which means 5 plus plus is the same thing as 5 plus 1. If we say a plus plus is the same thing as you say a is equal to a plus 1, or you say a plus equal to 1. These three are the same thing. You increment by 1. And the same way for decrement. For decrement, you can say a minus minus is the same thing as you say a is equal to a minus 1, and equivalent to a minus equal to 1. The same thing, the same way. Alright, so you increment with plus, you decrement with minus. Let us demonstrate that. Now, if I have two variables here, say variable a is equal to 0 and variable b equal to 5. So now here we can check for our condition to say as long as a lesser than b, then echo hello, echo hello. Now if we should run this like this, we know that a will always less than b based on our declaration here. In this case, the condition will always be true, and it may cause what is called infinite loop. That is, our application will keep running because there is nothing to stop it, and that is why increment comes into play. So we will now come here and say, okay, when you echo hello, then you increment a, So in this case, we have done something to terminate the infinite loop. So let's check what we have now. Click on this, refresh, you see we get 5 hellos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you want to break it down, you can just come here, let's put break line tag inside, or we concatenate. So when we do this, we get 5 hello each on the line. Now how did it happen? At first, when it gets to this while, it will check, is a less than b? Yes, it will echo hello because a is 0, b is 5. So it will echo hello and come here, add 1 to a becomes 1. It will go back, while loop, it will keep on running, keep on executing until the condition is no more true, because at this point the condition is true, a is less than b. So a is 1 now. It will come back and check, yes, a is still lesser than b. It will echo the second hello and then come here, add 1 to a becomes 2. Then go back and check, a is still lesser than b. it will echo hello, and add 1 to A becomes 3. It will go back and check, is A still lesser than B? Yes, it will echo hello again, and then add 1 to A becomes 4. It will go back and check, and then 4 less than 5, yes, it will echo the last hello, and then add 1 to A becomes 5. It will go back and check, A is now 5, B is 5. Is A still lesser than B? No. Then it terminates. It won't go beyond that. Then it will now come back down here and continue running the remaining statement, and that is why we have hello Johnson, hello 40, name Johnson James, because it will get out of the while loop and continue running the remaining code. That is how while loop works. And if you want to see this, how it is incrementing the number, rather than echo hello, we can just echo A. We can echo our A. Let me do that inside the string so that we can have the br. Okay, we echo our A, variable A, and then if we check, you see that it's as it is incrementing the A, which means you can use this to generate some set of numbers. If you were asked that, okay, write a program to generate number from 1 to 100, then you come here 1, and then you remember that it won't generate the last one, so you make this one to be 101. So if you run this now, you get it 1 to 100. If you want to get odd numbers only, then you change the strategy here to A plus equal to 1, and then rather than 1, we make it to be 2. That gives you odd numbers only. It's from between 1 to 100. If you want to get even numbers, you start this one from 2 and increment by 2. Then you get even numbers all through. So that is that on while loop. Alright. Now for for loop, so we're going to comment this out. For for loop, the syntax is simply for the condition and then the body of the for loop. But the difference between for loop and while loop is for loop takes 3 parameters. The first one thing we need to do is let us declare a variable C and call it 5, for instance. Terminate. So here inside this place, you declare another variable, because that's the syntax for that variable. Let's say D, for instance, is equal to 0. You terminate. That's the first thing in for loop. The second thing is the condition. Variable D less than variable C, you terminate, and then your increment, which is variable D plus plus. Then when this happens, you want to echo I. So here we have already implemented our D here, so we don't need to do any other thing. And by so doing, we get I. That is for loop. So in this case, if you are to use for each loop, you will need a data structure, and therefore that will move us to what is called data structure. What is data structure? Data structure means the form of your data, or the way, the arrangement of data being sent or passed into a variable. Taking for instance, if we say, variable name is equal to, into bracket like this, say John, James, Jack, Juliet. This type of data can be referred to as an array of items. You can see this as you have a table. You now arrange some things on the table. Your name, this variable is like the table, is the variable that holds everything. We now put on the table John, James, Jack, and Juliet on a straight line. So in this case, if we want to pick anyone, we can use the number, or you want to send someone to go and pick any maybe all these things are toys. Now say, okay, you can call Mary, go and bring the James toy. Is the second one on the list, on the table. So that is exactly how we arrange array. So in this case, this is a data structure. We have array, we have one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and multi-dimensional array, which can be referred to. We also have associative array in PHP. So multi-dimensional array is where you have array inside array. Let's say if I have another one inside this now, like this. Let's say I put these ones too in an array like this. So this is array inside array, multi-dimensional array. Okay. Alright, but let's start with this first. So with this, if you want to access anyone, we will say, for instance, echo variable name. If we echo name, we'll get error, so we won't have to do that. So you put the positional value there. When you have an array like this, your items are they have index positions. This is 0, 1, 2, 3. So in this case, if I say name 0, that means I'm doing what? I want to echo the first name right there. If I run this, I get John. If I change it from 0 to 2, then I get Jack. Okay, that's how we access each element, each item in an array. But if we want to display everything, then we might have to use for loops. So for us to use for loop, the best loop to use here is for each loop. How do we go about that? We can say for each array has n. You can use any variable of your choice. Then echo what? Echo n. I want to make use of this. I don't want it to echo that again. So I'll just remove this echo n, and therefore this go ahead and look through all the names for us. So we can now concatenate it with the break line tag. Concatenator, don't forget dot, then the quotes is a string, the HTML breakline tag is a string. So this breaks each item. That's it for each loop. Though we can use for loop for this and while loop as well, but we're going to be doing some calculation as we'll have it like this. Let me use for loop for instance. The first thing we may need to do is that we may need to do variable co, or let me say count. Is a variable, is different, is equal to count. There is a count function in PHP. Count what? Count name. If we count this, we count name and pass the name number of items here into this count. So we can now say, okay, so we have that one to be 4. But if we want to show it, we can first of all echo that, echo count, this is equal to this, okay, count is equal to count, we get it to be 4. Now we are not echo again, we just use that to get the value. If you now want to use for loop, you will say for variable x equal to 0, x less than our count variable, remember that. Okay, we didn't store that in our keyboard. Okay, count variable, or we can come here and do the count by ourselves by running the count function, but we don't need to do that anymore since we have done it outside. Then s plus plus. Now what we want to do here, we will now say name, the name, echo name. Rather than putting the number directly, we will put our variable x, because x is what will be incrementing now. So it will be putting the numbers here and get for each of these items, and that is it. We get our item out. But you can see that for each loop is much more efficient and better than for loop in this data structure concepts. Now the another type of data, if we don't want to declare this name as this, we can as well declare it as this. If you don't want to use the bracket, you can use an array function. Array is the same thing. Say variable 2, name 2 is the same thing as the first one. It's either you use the square bracket or you use array like this. It is the same thing. And don't forget, I mentioned something the other time. Said we can have array inside array. We can say, okay, this is also an array on its own. If you have something like this, how do you access the one inside? You know, this will be 0, and these two, they are now 1 inside here. So this is 0, 1, 2. Okay, so if we want to get the value, say echo variable name. If you say echo variable name 1, you know it is these two we are going to get. and that will return error because our echo can only output a single record, a string out. So we have to say echo name 1 and then we put another bracket 0 to get the first item in the second array that we have here. So which means that will return what? Okay, it's only giving us J because it's seeing this as another set of an array. What we can do in this regard is if we had used it inside name, the first name, this name. Oh yes, that was a mistake. I guess, you know, I used name rather than name 2 here, so that is what is causing it. Okay, that's it, James. So if we say name 1 we get Jack. Okay, so that is how we access a multi-dimensional array or two-dimensional array. Okay, so that is that. Now let's move on to the next one, which is object, associative array. Associative array is when you have key and value pairs. Taking for instance, if I say variable person is equal to array of what? If I say first name, now how do you associate in PHP? Use equal to and greater than sign. First name is taller, comma, or let me say TT, then last name is Toppy. Okay, now if we want to access this one doesn't have index numbers, it doesn't have any positional values. To access this first name is key, last name is key, YTT is value, Tope is value. So to access value we use key to access it. How do we go about that? We'll say person first name, for instance. So if we echo that, see, echo person first name, let me comment this. Then we get TT. If you say echo person last name, and don't forget in my array and associative array we can mix the values. Taking for instance, it doesn't have to do with data type. If I say this one is 4 for instance, and then that's my value, so it's not strongly typed that you must be the same or data type and all that. That will be the data, the content of your data. Alright, so now to use for loop with this, it will be good we use for each loop. Just as we have demonstrated, we cannot use for and while loop with this. It will not even run because there is no positional value. So we'll say for each for each person as variable p echo p. So here this returns all the value tt and tope. But if you now want it to have key and the value, like first name tt, last name tope, you want it to have key and value, then you come right here and make this one to be key and say exactly the same way we declare it here is associated with its value. We can use v, we can use value or anything we like. So here now p has become the key while v has become the value. So if we run this now, we get it first name last name because it is p. Then to have the value, we can quote this and then put the v inside. This will give us key and value. Thank you very much. We continue in our next lesson.